Elizabeth Chappell, a lifelong entrepreneur who finally found my niche. After years of new ideas and jumping from business to business, I figured out how to turn a craft into a successful career. In 2016, I started a monthly subscription box for quilters. That little startup has grown into a thriving, multiple six-figure business that I am so proud of. As a published author, designer of fabrics and patterns being sold throughout the world, my favorite thing to do is to teach others how to grow a career of their dreams. Each week, you'll hear from me or from other guests who are creative entrepreneurs, so you can learn exactly what to do and what not to do to grow a career that's more rewarding and successful than you ever thought possible. If you're ready to turn your craft into a career that you love, I am so excited you're here. Welcome to the Craft to Career podcast. Get ready to meet Sarah Locascio. She is the person behind Caravan Quilts, and she's going to share just such a cool, unique business model. You're going to hear some new vocabulary terms, at least new to me: drop model sales, fair market value. I mean, just some really great business advice and insight and really cool business model. And also as crafters, really connecting with the heart and the passion of what we do, taking things from the past, connecting it to now and to the future. And Sarah and I, you'll hear on this podcast, as she was talking about something, I was like, you know what? Let's chat after. I would love to have you do a guest blog post about this. So I can't wait for you to hear what that is. And we did talk after, and it is going to happen. So I'm very excited about that. But Sarah, she's a really great businesswoman. And you'll hear why she started this business, what she did before, and what has really helped this business to grow and to be successful. I also want to thank Lynn's Ray. She left a review on Apple Podcasts. She wrote, "As someone with a passion, ideas, and little knowledge, I have found this to be so helpful." So Lynn's Ray, thank you. I'm really glad that this podcast has given you some inspiration and knowledge. That's the whole reason to be for the podcast. I really want other creative entrepreneurs to be able to have access and tools that are free, that you can just come and learn and listen. So I'm so glad that that's the case. And if you are listening to this episode today, once you finish the episode, if you find value in this, if you enjoyed it, the nicest thing you can do is to leave a review for the podcast. That will help the algorithm know, hey, people are really resonating with this. It actually is of value. And they will share the podcast with other creative entrepreneurs. So if you are thinking, man, that was really insightful, helpful, whatever it might be, I mean, really the nicest thing you can do is let other creative entrepreneurs know, hey, check this out. This is really great. And to do that is to leave a review. So go ahead, let's jump in, listen, meet Sarah Locascio of Caravan Quilts. And again, if you find it helpful, just be sure to leave a review at the end. Sarah, thank you so much for being here on the Craft to Career podcast. Can you tell our listeners just a brief introduction of who you are in the quilting world?
Hi, Elizabeth. Thanks so much for having me today. So I'm Sarah Locascio, and I own Caravan Quilts, and I deal in antique textiles, specifically quilts from America.
Yeah. Okay. I'm so excited to have you here and to chat about what you do, because I'm very curious first of all, how did you get started with your company, Caravan Quilts?
Yeah. So I grew up in a home with parents who were really into antiques, and my mom's a quilter, and they always had a couple of antique quilts laying around. And then as I got older, I started picking up a few of my own. And then, my husband and I got our first home, and so I started collecting a few more. And then fast forward, we started having children, and we found ourselves in the middle of the pandemic. So I had just given birth to our littlest girl, and I was ready to come back from maternity leave, and was informed that my position was no longer available due to, COVID shutdowns and whatnot. So I was sort of had a predicament on my hands. I had a nursing newborn and really needed some income. And so I had been watching some other people doing drop model sales on social media. And I thought, I love sourcing quilts. It's one of my hobbies. And, I thought, why not give it a shot? So I created a page and started sharing some of the quilts that I had and really quickly found a really nice community. And it just sort of took off. I sold the ones I had and started looking for more. And it just sort of, it sort of snowballed and kept building from there. So,
Wow. So it was a necessity. I mean, I think a lot of people, when COVID happened, the job market shifted, like some things just didn't work out anymore.
definitely.
Two things I want to ask about. First, drop model sales. It sounds like you have a very good marketing business mind. What did you do before?
I worked in communications. I also have a big design background in retail design and visual marketing. So, there has been a bit of a learning curve in terms of owning your own business, but I have had some experience in the industry. So not a ton, but I think just enough to give me a little boost.
Yeah. And okay, when you saw drop model sales being done by others, what was it about that particular business model that sparked your interest or that made you think like, oh, I should try that?
Yeah, I think it's I found myself really excited for other people's drop sales. I felt like it created a feeling of, excitement and exclusivity. You felt like you had to get it while it was there before it was gone. And then it just sort of made sense for the product I was selling because it's not something that you have, 100 of. You're finding them as you can and releasing them and then quickly looking for the next collection. So, it made sense from a business standpoint in terms of the product and then also as a marketing tool.
Yeah. And my next question is it lucrative? Like, are you able to actually earn money? Because I know a lot of people, myself included, I'm like, quilts, people aren't really willing to spend that much on a quilt. So yeah, talk to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's one of my favorite quotes is if you're not making money, then it's just a hobby. So for me, I already shared that it was starting the business was a financial decision. And if it wasn't making me money, I wouldn't still be doing it. I'm able to provide for my family from my corner here. So yeah, it's what makes it fun is I'm making enough money to compensate for that part-time job and then also doing something that I really love. So there's value from both sides.
So there is a market. There are people who are willing to pay for these pieces.
Definitely. And what's been really fun to see in the quilt corner is what a large market it is. I think it's so niche that people forget how big the quilt industry is, not only from a maker standpoint, but also from a collection standpoint. So I think it's really just a matter of finding your community and finding your people.
Which is so great for listeners to remember because I'm curious. I'm going to bet, I won't say what, but I'll make a bet that there are some people who say like, that's crazy. I would never pay that much money for a used quilt or however. Have you ever heard that or do you not really get any of that?
I don't really get any of that. I think if you have that viewpoint, you're not really joining in. I think most people are really awed by the pieces, by the textiles. I think I have not met someone yet who doesn't fall in love with quilts. I mean, because they're quilts are a use item, right? But they're also artwork. And so they have this sort of emotional side to them that I think is sort of irresistible. Yeah, I have to say I've not encountered someone who is really surprised that quilts, especially, quilts with history, are a sought after item.
Okay, that makes my heart so happy, especially as a quilter. And then part of me wonders, is it because they're older that it adds more value,
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends who the customer is. There are definitely people who are into more contemporary pieces, and then there is a crowd who's really into more historic things. There are people even who are collecting specific eras. Some people are into really bright, cheerful 1930s quilts. Some people only collect things from the mid 19th century that are in, sort of earthy tones. So I think there's a customer, for every style and every era.
Yeah. And so how do you pick a price for these quilts? Like, yeah, I'm very curious.
Yeah, price. So that's such a great question. Pricing is one of the hardest parts of being a small business owner, I think, especially for me. I think when you're dealing with antique and vintage items, it's a whole nother thing. So you can't really use your standard pricing model in terms of percentage when you're selling antique and vintage. There's no like perfect formula in reality, right? So a lot of it is fair market value. And then figuring out, how much time do you have into the piece? How far did you have to travel to get it? Did you have to clean it? Did you have to take the time to clean it properly? And then how desirable is something is like the pattern or the color combo. But Elizabeth, one thing I realized really quickly was that I had to educate myself. Like I had to go back, right? I had to go back to the beginning and sort of get back into history class. I had to learn, the product. I had to learn the fabrics, the dyes, the quilt patterns themselves so that I could, recognize and fairly represent the value of the textiles of what I was selling. So I've worked really, really hard. I'm still working hard at, just learning, and it's fascinating. So I really enjoy that. But educating myself about the product has been a top priority, for myself as a business owner, and then also for my customers so that I can fairly represent things.
So how do you educate yourself? This is very interesting. I must know more.
Yes. And so it was tricky to figure out where to start. The first place I turned were books. I started, building my library. And then I reached out to a couple of people in the industry for sort of like a mentorship, and have connected with some really wonderful people who have been in the industry quite a bit longer and were willing to take me under their wing and sort of, guide me in the right direction. I think when you're dealing with something so specific, that could be really helpful. So I'm a big fan of personal connections and mentoring opportunities. And then I did quickly join the American Quilt Study Group, which is a nonprofit organization focused on quilt study. So that's quilt study, historical pieces and contemporary quilt study. And that's been really, really helpful as well.
Oddly enough, I was combing through your account, and I found the American Quilt Study Group through you, and actually they're going to be a future guest on the podcast as well. But how did you recently go to a retreat or something of theirs?
I did. So they do a yearly in-person quilt study seminar. This year we were in Portland, Maine, which was beautiful. This was my second one. This year I actually attended on a fellowship, which was an amazing opportunity for me. And it was fantastic. It's basically 5 days of in-person quilt study, of study sessions and lectures. Any research papers that have been published within the organization in the last year are presented. They do local tours. So we toured some of the historical societies and looked at quilts there. We looked at quilts at the Maine State Museum. So they work really hard to, get you involved with the history in quilting in that specific region, wherever the seminar happens to be. They do it in a different location every year. But yeah, it was wonderful. And being in person is always such a treat.
It is. Well, and that just warms my heart hearing about the academic in me is like, I've got to go to one of these things. So
yes, you totally geek out. And just being around other people who are interested in the same things that you are, you're just immersed in quilts and quilty things for 5 days, uninterrupted. It's super intense and it's wonderful.
And I just really get excited about the idea of this connection to the past. Like I'm doing this thing that people have done throughout history, and to learn more, I don't know, it just feels like we're all kind of tied together, that time becomes irrelevant. And
yeah, I mean, the quilts of yesterday are shaping what we're creating today, I think, for sure. And there's such, there's the academic side of it, there's the artistic side of it, there's the social side of it. So all of those things come into play for sure.
Yep. It puts a little fire inside of me. I'm like, ooh, that's so cool. I love it. So going back, you mentioned fair market value. What does that term mean, first of all? And how do you find what the fair market value of a quilt is?
Yeah. So, I mean, you can think in terms of like a car, right? So car prices change, yearly. So for example, when I first started, the prices of antique quilts was like rock bottom. Okay. If you go back to the early 90s, things were, I don't think I could have afforded anything back then, but 5 years ago, things were very inexpensive. Antiques in general, I think, even furniture, and then I think since then, there's been sort of a turning point. I think our generation and the next generation is beginning to appreciate these pieces quite a bit more. We still have the folks who've been collecting the entire time, but the value is climbing again. So you watch the market, you see what things are selling for, in auctions, other dealers, and then back to educating yourself. You need to know how valuable is this particular type of fabric, and why. So it's really about education, yeah, and paying attention to what's happening in other places in the market.
Yeah, which for the listener is good business advice. No matter what you're selling, do some market research, find out what's typical, and especially for antique, but find the value of what you're selling, offering, and
yeah. So I think the most important part is finding sort of a happy middle point, especially if you're just starting out. One of the dangers is underpricing your work or the product that you're selling and then trying to recover from that later on. In the same sense, you don't want to, come out with prices that are so high that it's unfair or, you're going to turn customers away. So finding that sort of middle point is always a good idea, especially when you're first starting out.
And I like that you said to think about, are you having to travel to get this? Like, make sure that you're compensating yourself for the time and the energy that's going into it as well.
Yeah. And when you're talking about quilts, that's so, so tricky, because if we charged what we should be charging for quilts, I mean, we'd all be rich.
Right. Yeah.
If you just, again, that finding that middle ground. Yeah. I don't think we're charging nearly as much as we should for what we're selling, but alas, hopefully we'll get there one day.
Right. So I am curious, how do you find these vintage quilts? I'm in Texas, so we have Round Top. Have you been to Round Top?
I have not been to Round Top yet, but I've heard much about it and have had some things that have been sourced for me at Round Top, but have not been there in person.
You got to come for the big spring market. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's on the bucket list for sure.
So yeah, where do you go though? Or do things come up and you're like, oh, I need to go get that? Or yeah.
Yeah, so all of the above. I'm using all avenues for sourcing. I'm sourcing all over the country. So sometimes that looks like traveling. Sometimes I'm sourcing online. I'll do auctions. And then a lot of it is connection. I've sort of built relationships with people in parts of the country that maybe I can't get to all the time, who are keeping an eye out for me. And then as I built the business, I do get, people contacting me with things they're looking to pass on. So it's sort of a 24/7 effort all over the map here.
It seems like it'd be kind of fun, like a chase a little bit, ooh.
It is so much fun. It's honestly one of my favorite parts of the business. It's like shopping,
Mm-hmm.
but it's justifiable. And it's so thrilling. When you find something special, there's just nothing like that feeling. So the hunt is definitely a huge part of the fun.
And then how do you time your sales? How does that part of your business work? Do you wait till you have so many pieces and then you announce a drop is coming, or how does that work? So
I have for a long time held myself to doing a drop every week.
Wow.
And some friends tease me sometimes about how reliable I am with that. But, it's really important for me to stay on schedule, especially with a young family. I need to know exactly what my week is going to look like and what I'm expecting for my output. And then it's also great for my customers because they aren't guessing, when the next thing is coming. They know that weekly they can depend on seeing some exciting new things. So I do it every week. For a long time, I've been doing it on the same night so that people really know when to show up and there's a clear message about what to expect. I've started switching it up a little bit more now lately, that I think we're a little more comfortable a few years in, but reliability and accountability have been two huge things for me in that sense.
Which there's an account, I don't know if you've seen it, the Halsey Homestead She does a drop as well. And it's, I want to say every Sunday, but I like it because I know that there's going to be weekly. And come Saturday night, I'm like, oh, I should go see what she's got this week. So I have to think from a customer standpoint and business reliability, income reliability. There's something to be said for that consistency.
Definitely. I agree with you. And I think, especially in all the noise that is on social media and in the world, it's easy to get lost. And so if your customer knows, okay, Saturday night, I'm getting excited because Halsey Homestead is going to be doing her thing tomorrow, you're less likely to sort of get caught up in the flow of things. People can find you easily.
Mm-hmm. So smart. Yeah, I really like that business model. I am curious, how do you clean and care for these vintage quilts?
Yeah, that's one of my number one questions from people. So there's really not a clear answer because it depends. And this is something that I feel really strongly about in terms of washing and cleaning. It really depends on the quilt. So because we're dealing with certain things that may be, almost 200 years old, not everything can be cleaned, in a general sense. So I had to really learn what pieces can be cleaned and when and how. There are some quilts that can just be, everything gets hand washed. There's never any machine involved. I think with quilts, putting a quilt in a washing machine, each time it stresses the piece. So I'm a big advocate for hand wash only. And then I really have to evaluate the quilt first and decide, is it worth, wetting this piece or not? And I've got a pretty good sense now of what can be wetted or what needs it or not. And, there's also steam cleaning. Sometimes things have come from a really great place. They've been kept in a cedar chest. I know where they're coming from. And so a good airing is sufficient. So,
and a good airing, do you put it out on like a clothesline or?
Yeah, again, it depends on the piece. If it's something that's really special, I'll put a clean sheet down, actually, just on the lawn. I'll put a clean bed sheet down and then the piece on top of it. And sometimes another sheet on top to protect it from too much sun, too much UV. So yeah, but on a nice dry day.
And have you ever bought an antique quilt and washed it and it damaged it? And you were like, oh, like you learned the hard way.
Sure. Yeah. And there's been times when I've had to wash something. It just needed to be cleaned. And I knew that might happen. There are certain fabrics that do not stand the test of time because of the dye processes of that time period. Like something silky or like brown cloth is something that we lose a lot. So yeah, I've washed it. And then as suspected, it thinned a bit. But, yeah, it does happen.
So no permanent long-term damage when you washed anything that you were like, this is just done now.
Elizabeth, I'm so careful. I've heard horror stories of color bleeds and stuff. So I err on the side of caution. Yeah, I'm super careful about washing things. But I definitely have had people contact me and say, oh my gosh, I washed my quilt, it had green and it just bled. What can I do? And so
what can you do? Is there anything?
Yeah. I think you can rewash it with some color catchers and that will take some of it out. But yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky.
Interesting. Yep. Nope. That gives me the heebie-jeebies because I even have a quilt I just made with Rifle Paper Company holiday fabric next to white and it bled. And I'm just and it's not an old quilt. It's not old. So
yeah, it's such a bummer when something like that happens.
Yeah. So how do you package and ship the quilts? Is it like you put it in any kind of special thing or?
Yeah. So I make sure that my packaging is really strong. I use heavy duty corrugated cardboard boxes. I, buy them new so that they're in really good shape. And I don't typically use plastic because I'm shipping so many things. I'm big on environmental care, so I don't like using a lot of extra plastic. So unless it's something that could potentially be severely damaged with moisture, I'll put a little, a plastic bag around it. But I make sure that things are folded properly in a secure box, something that's a thick cardboard. And then I try to put a little extra attention to the details. When you're buying something high end, like an antique quilt, you want it to look nice when you open it. So everything is wrapped in tissue. And I also include a document that I've created with information about the quilt, which I think is really important when you're selling even quilts that are made today to include as much information about the maker as you can so that that information can move forward with the quilt. So that's something that I always make sure is inside the box as well.
Okay, I have that written down here to talk about quilt documentation because I've seen you say like document your quilts, which is interesting because a lot of quilters that I've met don't, not a lot, but some like don't want to put their name on it. Like, no, I don't want it. It's like they feel like they're tooting their own horn almost. But tell me your thoughts on that.
So are those mostly women that you're
Oh
speaking
yeah,
to? I'm curious.
100%.
Yes.
100%.
So, and I think that's been true through the ages. There's a humble feeling as that we have as women, especially about our creative work. Some people, I've definitely met a few people who, for privacy reasons, don't want their names on their work. But I think, without digressing, quilting is something that maybe has not been given the value in the art world that it deserves. You would never hesitate to sign a painting. Okay. It's the same thing with a quilt. So I can tell you now, as someone who's handling thousands of pieces from 100 years ago, how absolutely devastating it is not to have the information about the person that created this incredible piece of art. I mean, it is just heartbreaking. So one of my missions is to encourage people who are quilt makers now to, if you're comfortable, include, anything that you want to include with that piece, just do it because, people will thank you for it. It's just so important.
I agree. Well, and I think it's sad when people are afraid to show up and take up space. I'm like, You are value. Your work is of value. I had not thought about the privacy aspect of it, but I would think that would be pretty unique, to want to have that. But quilt documentation. Do you have recommendations? I'm going through like, it'd be nice to have a printed label that you could sew on, or how have you seen people do that?
Yeah, so I'm just now dabbling into what contemporary quilt documentation looks like, but I know the Quilt Alliance, they do offer, I believe, a little kit for documenting your quilt. So I believe if you go on their website, they have that available. And then, even if you're buying some tags off of Etsy, you can customize them with your own name. There might be a few lines underneath to put in the date. Your location, region is really important for quilt making because styles can vary, area to area, what state you're in, whether you're in the north or the south, the east or the west. It's so interesting to note the location, where you were when you created this piece.
And fabrics, it seems so like not a big deal, like, oh, quilting cotton, but maybe at some point in the future, it'll be like, oh, that's very interesting. That's what everyone used at that time. And now we've changed.
Totally. Like you just said, your rifle paper, your rifle paper fabric, people will want to know in 100 years, okay, there was this designer who came out with this, she was first designing paper, then she came out with this fabric line. Those are the things that we're studying now, which textile mills produced those fabrics in the 1840s. Did they come from England? Did they come from France? Were we producing them here in the States? So yeah, totally. Even the fabric that you're using, if there's something of significance, throw it on there.
All right. That's so cool. I'm like jotting this down. I'm going to throw this out here on the podcast. I'd love for you to do a guest blog for me about quilt documentation. So we'll chat later, But I'm throwing that out there.
I would love to do it.
I'm also curious from a business standpoint, how has social media helped you grow your business?
Social media has been instrumental for me. It was my foundation. I think starting a business in the middle of a pandemic, I couldn't have done it without social media. If I had gone to open a brick and mortar, it would have meant pretty much instant failure, especially during that time. So it was really a gift for me. It was also free. So I didn't have to commit anything as a new business owner. I could sort of test the waters and, get my feet wet without having a huge expense in terms of a website. So, social media also allowed me to start connecting with people and finding my place in the community that I wanted to be in. I've met so many incredible people, collectors, designers, people who are designing fabric and patterns for, quilting now. It's endless. And so social media has been great for my business, but it's also been amazing for connecting with other people.
And how do like the collectors and the design? I mean, now I'm trying to think, how did I find you? I don't even know, but yeah, how do people find you on social media?
Yeah, I don't know. Do we thank the algorithm? I'm not sure. But
True.
I think, one thing I do is I love to interact on other people's pages as well, which I think helps. I'm not huge on hashtags. I really don't use them. I think I'll use them very in a blue moon, So, I mean, maybe partly just through the algorithm and then just networking, you're commenting on someone's page or you see, the name pop up. I've been following you for quite a while. I'm not sure how that happened either, but it's very nice. So
Yeah, it's funny. It must have been, I'm going to guess I went to the search tab and your something came up and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Let me go look at that. And then like, wait, what does
yeah.
she do? And yeah, that's my guess, my educated guess.
Yeah. And then I've always, because I'm really into storytelling and beautiful imagery, I've always made sure that my imagery is really eye-catching and enjoyable to look at. So I think that helps as well. When you have something beautiful, people are quicker to stop and have a look. So in terms of attracting, collectors and even interior designers, or just, someone who loves quilts who's buying things for their home, if it's really pretty, people are going to stop and they're going to be interested in what you're offering.
We are a visual industry. Like people will buy based on a picture if it's good or not.
Yes.
And you may have a beautiful quilt, but if the photo's not good, it's just not going to move.
Right, exactly. So yeah, photography is huge. And I love, I get people who come asking for tips. I think it's super important. I'm a big advocate of natural lighting and things like that. So it makes a big difference.
How did you learn photography? Is that something you already knew or you've taught yourself?
Yeah, I took a class in college, photography 101, but then it sort of became a hobby. And I do have another side business doing family photography locally, but it's really a hobby for me. I've just sort of blended skills that I've learned from, styling jobs and freelancing in the city, and then just a hobbyist photography, and sort of melded all of that into what I want, my work to look like.
Yeah. Now you mentioned in the city, and I should have asked at the beginning, but where are you located geographically?
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course. Sorry about that. I am in New York, so I'm just outside of New York City. So I spent a long time working in the city and commuting back and forth, and so I had a lot of lovely opportunities there as well.
That is cool. And I'm curious, this is just I wonder, it seems like some people have more of an eye for photography, color combination, that kind of a thing. It sounds like you're kind of drawn to, you have the eye.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that. I also think that it's something that anyone can learn, once you start. I think if, especially for your listeners, if you love quilts and you're into pattern and color and creating, I think it's there in everyone.
Well, and I started a fashion blog years ago, and looking back at my photos from that, I'm like, oh, that was rough. And I'd be writing in the direct sunlight. I didn't know, but the more you study, the more you take pictures and look, like it is learnable, so it's not a lost cause. If you're like, I'm not very good at that, you can learn.
Exactly. It's just another skill that you polish up, and the more you do it and you reflect on your work, you've come a long way, I'm sure, since those photos in the direct sun. You just keep working at it.
So I am curious, what has helped you grow your social media?
In terms of marketing tools, I'm going to admit I don't use a ton of, or I should say I didn't start off using a ton of marketing. I'm really into kind of like what I would consider organic marketing. So I really love the approach of just sharing, who I am and what I love. And then sort of like, oh, by the way, you can have gorgeous quilts too. And, I'm selling them here. So I've used Instagram, so social media as my primary marketing tool. And then once I was several years into my business and I had established myself, I grew into a website so that people could shop at any time in between my drops or, whenever they found my page. And then again, when it made sense, I added email marketing and some SMS marketing into it. So I do like a really laid back marketing approach without a lot of like overhead expenses, especially as a small business. I can't justify big marketing expenses. So I don't do a lot of paid ads or sponsored posts or anything like that. I don't think there's anything wrong with them. They're certainly not super expensive, but I tend to rely on just simple social media automations. I really like High Tide for doing a keyword triggers. So for example, if someone sees a beautiful quilt, they click on the caption and they want to know more about the quilt, I can say, I explain a little bit in the caption. And then if you'd like to know more about it, comment flying geese. And because I'm set up with High Tide, when they comment flying geese, they'll automatically get the information sent to their DMs. And I'm not having to do anything on my end. I'm cooking dinner for the family while this is happening. So that's something that's worth my money from a marketing standpoint. And then SMS has been really huge for me, a text message service. That's something that I really rely on so that people are on top of when the drop is about to happen, when my sale is about to happen.
Who do you use for the SMS text messaging?
I use Postscript. So I have that hooked up right through Shopify. Shopify is where I host my website. And I'm really careful with it. I only send out texts when I really need to. And I've had great feedback with that. I think my opt-out rate is like maybe 1 or 2%. So that's been a really great avenue for me. And then I did recently also add email campaigns. So I send out a newsletter now and some marketing about upcoming sales so people can see what'll be available. But I keep it really simple, especially not only for myself in terms of financials, but also for the customers. I try to introduce things when I feel like we're both ready for it.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, who's your email marketing provider?
I'm using Klaviyo right now.
Okay. And you like it? Good things?
I like it. I feel like it's pretty user-friendly. I'm not into using a lot of templates. I like to create my own really simplistic designs. So it's meeting my needs right now.
Yeah. And then I'm curious, this is a random question that I did not prepare ahead of time, but are there any emails that you get from companies that you love to open that you're like, ooh, what have we got this time?
Yeah, again, I'm really into beautiful imagery. So one of my favorites is Jamie Beck, her Sunday, now the name's going to escape me, but her Sunday newsletter where she talks about, what she's in France. So what restaurants they've been to, who's on her radar. And she always puts beautiful imagery in. And then it's not really a newsletter, but I have gotten into Substack lately. So I feel like those two things kind of align a little bit. So I also really love. Yeah. So anyway, I appreciate emails with not too much text content, just enough to support really nice imagery, things that I'm going to enjoy looking through.
Yeah. There was one more you were going to say I also really like. I'm like, who is it?
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of Julia O'Rourke. I love the Rudy Jude brand and I've been following her stories for a long time because she shares a lot about home life and the things that she's creating and her artwork. So I do enjoy her Substack as well. So that's something that I look forward to each week. And she is doing hers in video format right now, which is something that I also enjoy.
See, I wrote those down. I'm like, let's go take a look. I love a good email that I'm excited to open. And I study those like, why am I so excited to open this? How can I replicate that for my audience,
Yes, taking cues from what's successful for you. Yeah, as a reader, definitely.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to someone else out there who's thinking of starting a creative business?
Oh, my number one piece of advice. I think authenticity is my number one tip. I think if you can immerse yourself in your own authenticity in your creative work and your business, it's the fastest way to find your people and to grow a brand that you love and that other people are going to love. They feel like they can trust you, right? Because you're being yourself. And I think being authentic also helps to create realistic goals for yourself. And I think people confuse authenticity with, it sort of has this vulnerable feel to it. So it doesn't necessarily mean like sharing your whole self, right? It just means you're sharing in a way, you're building your brand in a way that's true you, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, not oversharing. You don't have to share everything about you, but the piece of the pie that you do share is real. It's like
Right.
you're not pretending to be something you're not or someone you're not, or is that what you mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there is it doesn't matter what you're interested in, what your style is. I guarantee you there are thousands of other people who are either already interested in it or don't know that they're going to be interested in it yet. They're there, they're waiting for that. So never feel like your thing is too niche because there is a crowd just waiting to be part of your community. Yeah.
I love that so much because okay, so I teach quilt pattern writing and people are like, there's too many quilt pattern writers. And I'm like, you go to your local mall, even walk down your street and ask your neighbors, do you know a quilt pattern writer? No. But we inundate ourselves with what we are interested in. So in our views, everyone is that. Everyone knows about it. It's oversaturated, but the world at large doesn't know about that thing. And there's room for you to show up in your authentic way,
Exactly. And there's nobody doing it exactly the way that you're going to do it.
Yep. And that's what I think success is when you do bring that bit of je ne sais quoi, the piece of you that no one else can do because it's you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that. And what is one of the biggest lessons that you've learned as a creative entrepreneur?
My biggest lesson, I've learned a lot of lessons. But I would say my biggest lesson that might be of value to other people, I think holding yourself accountable and setting yourself up for success in terms of creating a schedule for yourself. I don't know how many of your listeners might also have a family in the background or be, doing more than one thing. But the biggest lesson I learned was having a set schedule for myself and not allowing too many distractions to get in the way. So, that might look like setting out what Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday looks like, and then having boundaries for yourself as a small business owner. What time do you clock out at the end of the day? That's something that's really hard for me, especially with things being on social media. I need to make sure that I'm clocking out at a certain time so that I can turn my focus, to my family and the rest of my life. So I would say scheduling and holding myself accountable has been one of the biggest challenges and also one of my biggest lessons.
I can imagine too, if I were in your shoes thinking like, well, if I'm not checking, I might miss this quilt and someone else might get it,
Yes. And we always joke anytime we go somewhere as a family and we drive past, a tag sale or a thrift store and we don't have time to stop. And I'm like sweating because I feel like the perfect quilt is just waiting inside, I'm missing it. But yeah, I mean, there's a certain, there's a certain level of it's never turned off, you're always on, but having, those boundaries where, okay, now is not the time. Yeah. It's been important. So
yeah. I can see the tug and the pull there, that would be.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
And then I'm curious, what's next for Caravan Quilts? Would you have future goals and dreams?
Yeah, this is my favorite question. I think one of my toxic traits is dreaming up great business ideas, but I would say right now my biggest goal is working on refining my collections. I'm working like extra hard on finding especially gorgeous pieces and pieces that are in really collectible condition for my clients and having it be a space, especially on social media, where people can come to learn. I've learned so much and I'm learning so much every day and I want to share that with people. So even if you're not ready to invest in your own, your own piece or your own quilt at that moment, you can still take something away. You can, learn a little fact or take home a little tidbit with you. And overall, I'm always striving to keep my space cozy and delightful for people. So that's an ongoing goal for me.
I'm curious, do you think you'll ever offer educational trips or classes about quilt history, maybe on site location or something?
Yeah, that has been on my radar for sure. I think I'm also really interested in visiting some local guilds. I think I have collected enough things in my personal collection to maybe start doing some trunk shows. So that's definitely a goal, as well as doing some in-person things for people who are interested in a little bit more of a hands-on view of some of the things that I've collected myself.
Okay. Yeah. That's something as you're talking, I'm like, man, you have so much knowledge, and I think that would be really cool. So
Yeah,
very
I would love
fun.
that.
So for our listeners, where is the best place to find you, follow you?
Yeah, so it's at Caravan Quilts on Instagram. And then I have the website, caravanquilts.com. So that's caravan, like gypsy caravan. It's Caravan quilts.com.
Perfect. And I'll put the link for those in the show notes. And thank you so much for being a guest on the show. It was lovely to learn more about what you do and this cool career that you've created.
Oh, thank you so much, Elizabeth. It really has been my pleasure.
Sarah, thank you so much. My goodness, that was such a fun conversation. I just feel so inspired and connected to my roots, to history, to all these creatives who've come before, and also to think about the future, how we as, quilters, crafters, whatever it is that we're creating, how to share that legacy with the future, how to make sure that it's not forgotten and to keep the history alive. Just such a beautiful business model that I love. So listeners, I hope that you enjoyed meeting Sarah as much as I love chatting with her. Be sure to check out her business, Caravan Quilts. And if you did find this insightful or helpful, be sure to leave a review. And we will see you back here next Friday with a brand new episode of the Craft to Career podcast.